Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Perspective. I'm your host, Khalid Butt, and we will continue our discussion on the regional situation, on Pak-India relations, on Pakistan's role to tackle the aggression by the Indian side, also Pakistan's foreign policy, how our foreign minister has tackled the foreign policy in the wake of the aggression from the Indian side, the challenges that confront our foreign policy as well. We know that the Indian External Affairs Minister went to the OIC ministerial meeting, and that was the reason why our foreign minister did not attend that meeting, and he's taking up the issue with the UAE government as we speak. Also, the foreign minister of Luxembourg, Jean Asselborn, is in Islamabad. Both leaders, both the foreign ministers also had a press briefing in which important issues were discussed. Also, the Saudi State Minister for Foreign Affairs, Adil Al-Jubair, is currently in Islamabad as well. He's met with the foreign minister, he's met our Prime Minister as well. A lot of important things are occurring in the region, but the most important of it all is that Pakistan has shown to the world, to the region, that it is desirous of peace. What it wants is peace in the region. It does not want aggression. It will never be the first to start any aggressive process, but it will, of course, retaliate in case of any aggression from the enemy's side. Now, to talk about the foreign policy challenges, and of course the role of our Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in all of that. Also, our Foreign Minister in the National Assembly has invited all the important opposition leaders and members to talk to him to formulate a joint consensus as far as Pakistan's foreign policy is concerned. To talk about that and more, we've been joined by three guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. On my very right is Asif Durrani Sahab. You're a former ambassador. Durrani Sahab, it's a pleasure to have you here on our show.
Thank you.
Next to him is Dr. Rizwan Nasir, a foreign affairs expert and a regular on our shows. It's a pleasure to have you again on board, sir.
Thank you.
And last but not the least is senior journalist and reporter Isa Naqvi. Isa, thank you to have joined us because you have an insight on foreign affairs. You were in the National Assembly as well in the recent days. Let's begin with you, Asif Durrani Sahab. Asif Durrani Sahab, how would you, as an ambassador, as someone who's been to Iran, to the UAE, to Afghanistan, to the US, term the current foreign policy of the government in the last 6 months?
Well, I think this government deserves praises for pursuing a proactive foreign policy, which has resulted in, number one, tremendous amount of investment in the country because economically we have had a bad patch during the past few years. And secondly, on the political front, there has been a positive movement towards Afghanistan because Americans and Taliban are talking to each other.
And the Americans have thanked Pakistan's efforts for facilitating these talks as well.
Definitely. And if this was also reflected during the recent India-Pakistan conflagration, in which American president himself, while expressing concern for the situation, he called upon India also not to deteriorate or not to spoil this show in a manner, not in so many words, but it was actually disliked by the Indians. So Pakistan has had a very proactive policy during the past 6 months, and I think this government deserves applause for that.
All right. Speaking of the government's applause, let's also talk about the National Action Plan, Rizwan Nasir. That is something very important, has been in the limelight since December 2014, but not all the points have been adhered to since then. A lot has taken place in Pakistan. We fought 2 important wars against terrorism, but all the 20 points that had been enunciated in the National Action Plan in 2014 have not yet been implemented in letter and spirit. Now, this present government and also the Foreign Minister has said that they want to implement all the points with all the stakeholders possible. Do you feel this is going to be an easy task or an uphill task? Your take.
Certainly, it's very challenging if these are 20 points a National Action Plan. In 20 points, it's very different, starting from those groups who have been creating, who have been causing terrorist activities in Pakistan, they are not the local ones. There are transnational terrorist groups as well. So we may be able to stop the activities of the local group. How about the transnational? They are getting funding from other countries. There is assistance from other countries. So it becomes more complicated if the external actors and non-state actors are involved. In that, as far as the domestic concerns on, for example, registration of madrasas, geotagging of madrasas, lots of achievements has been achieved, lots of progress have been made about it. Secondly, there is another very prominent issue. Before that, what we came up with is the Paigam-e-Pakistan. Paigam-e-Pakistan was a response which took a long time. It could have been done earlier, but when Paigam-e-Pakistan came,
was a very, very important collective decision made by all the different schools of thought from all different, how should I put it, elements of our religion.
Absolutely. You know, before that, the terrorists, they were glorifying their people, so-called martyrs. They were saying, this is what is now through Quran and Sunnah, the ulamas from all school of thoughts, they sat together, they actually closed that window where the recruitment was coming. And one important thing is that our government has worked a lot on the hawala and hundi, I mean money laundering. Yes, there is a lot of need to do more because FATF, Pakistan's name is already in FATF grey list. And internationally, European countries and the United States are asking that Pakistan need to do more efforts about it. This is how they want to choke the financial lifelines of those terrorists who are still raising funds locally and they're getting internationally. But I would say, as far as if we divide into two halves, one is domestic concerns, one is international one, Pakistan has achieved a lot. After Zarb-e-Azab, you see there is a lot of, we have controlled the situation in Pakistan. You will see very few attacks, very few. It means we have our armed forces, they have smashed the terrorist networks in Pakistan. And there is a problem with the literature. Literature is still reaching to the people. To those people, it's still, Pakistani government through FIA has made some efforts on online radicalization of the students, on radicalization of some of the people in Pakistan. Our armed forces did a great job, but our law enforcement agencies are also doing a great job.
And the best thing about it is that all the organizations, whether it be the armed forces, the government, or the law enforcement agencies, are on one single page. Now, Isa, let's talk about FATF. What, in your point of view, are the main question marks, let's put it that way, as far as the FATF is concerned? The government is hell-bent. We've seen the proscribed groups being banned, the recent steps that have been taken in accordance so that we come out of that grey list of the FATF, but also as a measure so that terrorism and extremism in our country does not exceed and does not resurface as it did a couple of years back. What are the major question marks currently, as a journalist, as somebody who frequents the National Assembly as well, listens to discussions from all quarters? What's your point of view on that?
I think that there is a lot of issue of perspective of how Pakistan is portrayed to the outside world, and there have been some discrepancies when it comes to effective diplomacy of actually improving Pakistan's image, especially to the West, and of how the Western media looks at Pakistan and how the things are cooked up. We've seen that Pakistan's image has been on purpose and by design maligned by some of the lobbies that are actively working against Pakistan, and we have somehow, we should accept that, and our diplomats have failed in countering that effectively, and our media has also failed to counter that effectively. When you talk about the actions that Pakistan have taken ever since this APS incident happened and a joint national action plan was agreed upon by all the stakeholders and all the political parties and all the state institutions were on one page, that this is one very thing that is against Pakistan's national interest, and that will not be given space or route to stem itself and to root into Pakistan. Now, that has not been actually portrayed to the outside world. And even the
efforts, what you
actions-
mean to say, Isa, is that the efforts
Even the
that we've
actions that-
made have not been properly propagated to the outside world, that look, A to Z, these are the efforts that we've done, A to Z, these are the steps that we have taken internally and externally. This is what you were trying to
And
say.
you
basically.
cannot undo all the wrongs over the night. It would definitely
takes time.
It takes time, but all the actions that have been taken by Pakistan, they have not actually reached the outside world that Pakistan is serious about.
And the
like,
required
taking all
quarters,
those
this is also
actions.
what you want to mean to say. All right. Ambassador Saab, that of course then brings me automatically to you. You being an ambassador, being in countries that have been very important, Afghanistan, Iran, the US, the UAE and others. Do you feel Pakistan on the diplomatic front is lacking? And if so, what are the reasons?
I don't think so. The reason is that United States is the #1 superpower, rather hyperpower, and it failed in Afghanistan. So what should we say? So America failed in Afghanistan, and if they just dump all their failures on Pakistan, so that would be unacceptable. But when they dump those failures on us, their media picks up, and they then
Highlight it.
They highlight it, and then they malign Pakistan. So that tussle has been going on for a while. And,
But have we managed to, on the foreign office front, on the diplomatic front, managed to counter all of this propaganda, let's put it that way?
when you talk about this propaganda, so who controls the media, we should be aware of that, especially in the West. And there are few media houses which have the monopoly. And they would like to listen, or they would like to speak what their mentors or what their supervisors want to do that. And this is what precisely is being done. So therefore, we have to understand how the international media works. And I would rather
mean to
invite
say-
you.
did
I
you-
would, I would rather invite you to have a program on that.
All right.
That how the international media manipulates certain developments, and then when there are failures, they can dump it on other countries.
But do you mean to say also in another way is that we haven't been able to properly counter the propaganda
we have
from
been,
the
but
international
listen,
media?
see your resources. What are your resources? How much are you spending on the resources? How much you are spending on the lobbies? This is not. There is no free lunch in this world. When you are in the United States, you have to act according to the norms which are being pursued in the United States.
Exactly.
And that country runs through lobbyists. And if you don't engage the lobbyists, don't
right.
just rely on the MSC people. 3-4 people
All
cannot.
right. Dr.
wage that
Saab,
war.
this is very interesting. Spending on lobbies, lobbying, it's one of the most important thing in the United Nations, in the US, in the European Union. Are we lacking? Are we not strong enough as far as our foreign lobbying is concerned?
Well, if we look at this, I would like to quote a very prominent scholar in international relations, John Jameer Scheimer and Stephen M. Walt. They authored a book, U.S. Foreign Policy, Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. Now, what he wants to say is that there is a very strong lobby of Israel in Washington, D.C. that is working only for Israelis' interest. And there is another research about the Indian lobby in Washington, D.C. During Trump's election campaign, the Indian lobby was working proactively to support Trump because they were saying, this Trump is anti-Pakistan. In future, when he comes to power, we can, we can have an axe to grind from.
Well, in the
Trump
beginning,
against
that did
Pakistan.
kind of seem true, but later he also went back on his word as far
Calculations
as.
sometimes go wrong. And what happened in Pakistan, in terms of Pakistan, Ambassador Saab was right. We lack resources. We don't lack talent.
All right.
We have very professional diplomats. I believe we can also have, but it needs resources. You need to engage people. Your people sitting in, like you have a United Nations representative now who is always highlighting Pakistan's issues, what Pakistan is achieving, what Pakistan has done a lot. Maliha Lodi in the United Nations.
Exactly.
You will
Her
see
role
she
is commendable.
Of course, commendable. And what? She is alone doing that. Our people overseas, diaspora who is sitting in UK, who is sitting in Europe, who is sitting in Washington, D.C., why don't we mobilize them? It needs resources.
All right.
Where we get resources from? Your business community sitting there, your students sitting there, you can mobilize even them.
All
They
right.
are your power which can work for your interest as well.
All right. Isa, does that mean that we need to devise strategies to mobilize all our diaspora who are at least intelligent enough in all parts of the world? Have we not done that in the past?
I think it's propaganda warfare, and my take on the previous question as well would be that look, I do understand that like when we compare Pakistan's foreign office and Pakistan's foreign policy and Pakistan's diplomat, we are actually making a wrong comparison because we compare them with the Indian diplomats. Look at their spendings and the budget. There definitely is an issue of budget, but is that an excuse? Shall we say that like this is excuse enough to tell that like yes, we are failing on that front, but we are. It is propaganda warfare, and our government, our foreign office needs to utilize media effectively, and each one of us, any Pakistani who is like sitting abroad, who is living outside Pakistan, shall consider himself an ambassador of the country, and it should be our duty to actually portray the true image and represent the actual picture of what's happening on ground in Pakistan.
Which brings me to another interesting aspect of it all. You talk about propaganda warfare. The media's role, especially, let's go towards India. Open any channel, private or public, they are on the same page. Thrash Pakistan, level baseless, useless allegations against Pakistan and continue to thrash Pakistan in whatever way possible. We, on the other hand, in Pakistan have been very sane, very neutral, and to some extent diplomatic in our way of projecting things, and more or less truthful in our way of projecting the issues that are plaguing the region. Do you mean to say, Isa, that we need to come on the same page as them? I mean, be as dirty, let's put it that way, as them?
It isn't about like being the propaganda machine, being rational, being realistic about things, and there are certain journalistic norms that should be followed. There are two aspects to what Indian media is doing. Like, look, one thing that they have actually addressed their domestic audience successfully, but on the other side, if you would see what Washington Post has written today, what New York Times in their articles have mentioned, and now
what Washington Post and New York Times have written, so also Reuters, what it has mentioned lately, isn't that also a success of our policies, of our diplomacy, of our lobbying in some way?
Like I wouldn't say that like this is our like that like the things actually happened in a manner. If you just like see
that facilitated Pakistan,
how events have unfolded over the past 15 days or 15 or 20 days since the Pulwama incident, things have like genuinely, I believe that somehow they have favored Pakistan, and on the diplomatic front, where India was chanting those slogans of isolating Pakistan diplomatically,
yes.
And as we talk right now, we have had two foreign ministers visiting us today, and after
and who are here
even,
as we speak.
Yes, as we speak, the
and
Saudi,
we have the German foreign minister who's coming on the 12th of this month.
Exactly. And during this course of time, our foreign minister could not visit Japan. He was scheduled to visit Japan on 24th, and due to the escalation between Pakistan and India, he had to postpone his visit. And during all this time, our foreign minister had been, and our foreign office had been in talks and consultations with almost all the capitals in the world, on the map of the world that matter, and that actually tells that Pakistan is an important player in the region, and Pakistan does matter. And but again, like calling it exactly and putting it in a manner that it was designed by Pakistan, it was Pakistan's success, things have favored us.
All right.
And Indian policies, they have like the Modi, or like they were thinking that it can be like another repeat of how they managed to convince their domestic audience of the hoax that was created after the last so-called surgical strike inside Pakistan. It would be something similar, but now how the events have unfolded.
Surgical strike that killed the so-called 300 plus people as claimed by India. Ambassador Saab, very interesting. Are we riding a crest of favorism which somehow comes from certain quarters without us pushing to that extent? Or is it genuine work from different quarters in Pakistan that is helping us achieve that?
We should not just undermine ourselves. My advice would be that look for your own resources, look for your own talent, and look for your own hard work, which has been put in.
And appreciate it.
During all those days since Pulwama occurred. But at the same time, let me tell you that, for instance, on terrorism issue, India published almost 100 books during the past 2 years. How many titles have appeared in Pakistan? Hardly one. Similarly, so when I talk about the resources, I talk about the strategic resources which have to be put in place, where you have to run your diplomatic, because that helps you in diplomacy. That helps you to sell your narrative outside the world. Similarly, when in this Pulwama or post-Pulwama developments, when Indians tried to so-called surgical strikes they had at Balakot, the world has seen. So you cannot hide the truth. They tried to sell. They tried to sell optical illusion about their whatever
And
they
they still
were.
continue to do that on their media.
Precisely. So the issue is that Indians have tried their best, but at the same time they have also realized, and now there is a big discussion inside India that we were not telling the truth. We were not telling the truth to the people. And it is all now coming back to haunt Mr. Modi that he has used it for his election campaign in order to have a
Of course, we have
re-election.
Rahul Gandhi who is openly accusing Narendra Modi.
Not only that, they also hounded their own journalists who wanted to question the
Of course,
veracity
we've
of
seen
their
the
claims.
visuals as well. We've shared it on our.
They have been hounded badly. Similarly, when they talked about the operations and retaliation, and when Pakistan retaliated, they tried to belie that, but they couldn't. They couldn't succeed in that. So
And then
therefore-
came the goodwill gesture of releasing
here
the
lies-
Indian pilot.
Here lies certain ground realities which the world has seen, and which has the world has now discovered that they have. You just cannot hide through your fingers the sun. The sun is there.
Exactly.
And it is everyone has to see that, and therefore they have to see the reason, and this is now being seen, and more importantly, what we have to look at it from this Pakistan-India recent spat. It is very important that we are still passing through a delicate situation. We cannot lower our guards.
True.
And we have to be not only at the military level, but on the diplomatic level, as
On
well
the
as at
political level as well.
propaganda
And that is
and
what was
political level.
enunciated by our foreign minister in the National Assembly. He said, let's all get together
Yes, and the best thing-
and talk of the important issues that plague the country.
And the best thing is that all the political parties in Pakistan
Are on the same page. That is very important, sir.
About Modi and India, that
Yes.
reminds me.
Isa, go ahead.
Yeah, that reminds me of one famous Urdu couplet, and it reads, "उलझा है पाँव यार का जुल्फे दराज में, लो आप अपने दाम में सयाद आ गया." Like India has actually fallen prey to its own clutches of the designs of actually maligning Pakistan, putting Pakistan on the back foot, isolating Pakistan diplomatically. All that has actually failed, and it has been proven to the world that it was a staged thing, and it was and it's very much likely that at the end of the day, this again another this proves to be another incident where India was itself, like herself, involved, and it was a false flag operation. I think if investigations are
Properly
carried
conducted.
out, properly carried out, I think that would be the end result.
Exactly. And kudos to Commander Noman Ali Khan and Squadron Leader Hassan Siddiqui, who shot down the two planes. I needed to say that aloud as well, because that was also what was reiterated in the National Assembly. Dr. Nasir, we talk about being seen, we talk about Pakistan's perspective now being openly sought by the international powers. The Foreign Minister of Luxembourg is here. During the press meeting, he said that the European Union is likely to adopt a new strategic plan for Pakistan. Do you feel that Pakistan's strategy on the foreign front is going to work in a positive manner so that the future strategic plans that are made either by the European Union or by the US, or how the US formulates its foreign contacts or relations with Pakistan, will have a positive or optimistic tangent?
In my viewpoint, if we look, we are now out of that era when we were fighting a war against terrorism. Now we are just trying to rebuild from that, because what we lost. We actually, during the war, the huge investors, they ran from Pakistan. There was another side, energy crisis in Pakistan. They were not feeling secure, the investment is secure in Pakistan. After the inception of this CPAC project in Pakistan, they were thinking that now China is going in Pakistan, let's see what happens. Now, after you see Chinese, they have done a lot of work in collaboration with Pakistan. This CPEC, as it is moving ahead, it is also building the trust of other nations. You see, BRI is going to connect Asia and Europe, Eurasian plan.
Exactly.
So Pakistan, look at it's the hub. When Gwadar port is operationalized fully, it has a huge potential. Like the Singaporean port once was a dormant port. Now today you go, Singapore is one of the Asian Tiger's best economy in Singapore. Pakistan's resources were not tapped properly. Now the new era now begins after now the United States is in dialogue with the Taliban. Pakistan is assisting that dialogue.
And they have openly, as I said in the beginning of the show, also thanked Pakistan for facilitating these talks.
Yeah.
So that is also a very important aspect of it all.
Yeah, once Afghanistan is settled, you see, we have to normalize with India as well. After that, we have to rebuild relationship with Iran as well. So you see, we can grow we have regional potential. Once we have regional potential, then you will see not only European countries, some African countries, East Asian countries, Japan, Philippines, they will also come.
Malaysia.
Malaysia. And you know, these economic zones, that's really wonderful. It has all over the Pakistan, it is covering. What will happen in Pakistan? Light engineering products. That food we were not exporting. We were, there was a dearth of food in Pakistan because of agriculture, agriculture-based society. But we were not having proper equipment for even harvesting. Now after all these things come in, we will be able to export our food. We'll be able to export our engineering products in other countries. Not only that, even heavy machinery, Pakistan should start working on it. Europeans, they were looking for a market. Why India is so popular among Americans and Europeans? India is a huge market. Huge market for what? Their products. Pakistan also is a huge population. But what we need to do...
It has been plagued by other issues in the past. That's
Absolutely.
why it wasn't able to stand on that front and do the needful. But I think now is the time, and I think the government is putting the right resources and doing the needful to do that. Ambassador Saab, our Prime Minister has visited very important countries since he took power and re-established that onus of relationship that had kind of somehow been lost somewhere with certain countries, let's put it very bluntly. Also, our Foreign Minister visited a lot of countries. In the perspective of the Pulwama incident, we have also re-energized our contacts with all the important leaders, all the important foreign ministers, all the important regional, national, international leaders as well. Do you feel that Pakistan, as far as its foreign policy is concerned, in the last 6 months, let's analyze it a little bit. Do you feel that these visits abroad have kind of put a new energy, a new onus into the existing foreign policy perspective of Pakistan?
I think the foremost success what one can count is Afghanistan.
Okay.
It's if you look at it, say a year ago, no one could talk about a possibility of talks between the United States and the Taliban. But now it's a reality.
They weren't willing in the past, Ambassador Saab.
This is precisely because Americans were not ready. Americans were not ready to hold talks with the Taliban, and Taliban would not speak to the Ashraf Ghani government. So when the Americans, they gave in, so these talks are proceeding, and there are reports that those are proceeding quite satisfactorily. The ultimate result, you will find what transpires after these talks. So for this government, breaking the ice on Afghan issue has been, I can say, because having dealt Afghanistan for many years, this is an issue which is more important than India. This is my personal view, but
why do you say that?
I would say that because it is because of Afghanistan we have suffered in terms of blood and treasure. Our wars with India, we didn't lose so many people or in terms of monetary losses that we have lost due to Afghanistan. This is very important. And this is Afghanistan that because of after 9/11, that the world issued travel advisories about Pakistan. It was not our fault, but we. Then we also suffered due to the terrorism, which actually they wanted to take revenge with Pakistan because Pakistan had to agree to and Pakistan had to comply with the resolution 1373, which called for taking into account those perpetrators who were responsible for the 9/11. So therefore, Pakistan had no choice. While we were recognizing the Taliban regime, but Taliban regime would not listen to us, and they would not hand over Osama bin Laden to the Americans or for a legal course. So therefore, Pakistan had many challenges, and as we say that we lost more than $100 billion in terms of opportunity cost, is precisely because these Americans, they called us as non-NATO allies, but at the same time, they issued advisories. What was the result? The result was the people were not traveling. Our business cost has gone up. Insurances have gone up when it comes to our imports and exports. So therefore, now situation is changing. Now situation is changing that when you look at the graph of foreign tourists coming to Pakistan, that has gone up. That has gone up in the past few months. In fact, so this is very positive development which has taken place.
All right.
And at the same time, there is an evolution of a strong regional policy of Pakistan. You see, this talks.
What has changed? You talk about an evolution of regional policy. In your perspective, what has changed?
Again, Afghanistan.
Okay.
Okay. Because earlier Iran would not recognize Taliban, but now they are talking to the Taliban. Earlier Russians were quite averse to the Taliban. Now they are talking to the Taliban. In fact, they facilitated Moscow dialogue. Chinese are in direct contact with us. So all the neighbors of Afghanistan are actually talking to the Taliban.
And want peace in the region.
So precisely. So I think, and the credit goes to Pakistan for facilitating as well as convincing the neighbors of Afghanistan to have a dialogue with the Taliban so that we are on the same page. And then we, as neighbors, we can collectively assure security for the whole region. And this is precisely is going to give Pakistan more advantages. Once the peace returns to Afghanistan, then sky's the limit.
Yes.
And China's this BRI and CPEC, we are already at the takeoff stage.
True.
So we can, and the result of this CPEC is that Saudis have
shown
will
interest,
be
so have
not,
other European
not only
countries.
interest.
They
have
want,
signed MOUs.
of course, exactly.
It is
For
worth
Gwadar.
$20 billion for Gwadar. So there will be, you can say, a momentum. It will generate momentum.
When we talk of momentum, Dr. Rizwan Nasir, the momentum of peace, let's talk a little bit and extend that scope for peace that Pakistan has initiated. Pakistan wants peace with India. Pakistan wants peace in Afghanistan. Pakistan wants peace in the region for stability of the region. That is why we didn't initiate any war-like process despite the propagation of the same by India. That is why we returned Abhinandan to India very quickly without any pressure whatsoever as a goodwill gesture. How do you see Pakistan's peace gestures, whether it be for the Afghan peace process, a relationship with India, and do you feel it will have positive repercussions or not in both spheres, Afghanistan, India?
Well, in Pakistan, Pakistan itself is looking for peace because the biggest victim of the terrorism and other related activities is Pakistan. Yeah, one thing is important, when Afghanistan went destabilized, it had very major impact on Pakistan. When the American troops came, Article 5 of NATO, they invoked, they came and collectively they thought they will be winding up the war within 1 or 2 months. Their calculation went wrong. Why? because the people of Afghanistan were not supporting this war. Neither Pakistan was on board. Then Pakistan was coerced to join the war. When Pakistan was coerced to join the war, there was again a rift in Pakistan because Pakistani people were again supporting. Yeah, Taliban are right because they did not do anything. There was a division of opinion within Pakistan. So it was very tricky situation for Pakistan. What happened? There was a wave of terrorism in Pakistan. People, a large number of people from our society, they were saying, no, why Pakistan is fighting others' war? Then later on, what happened? We lost a large number of people in bomb attacks in hospitals, train stations, markets, everywhere. They realized now these are the people, we need to get rid of them. Then eventually they realized we should support Pakistan's government. When they started supporting our armed forces in the beginning, when Al-Mizan started in 2002 or 3, they saw that the people were not supporting armed forces in there. So there was casualties, there were casualties. They started negotiations. Maulvi Naik Muhammad in the very beginning, he was a pivotal in bringing peace between Pakistan armed forces and Taliban. What happened? He was by the drone attack, he was killed. See, Americans, they played double. They said one time they were coercing Pakistan, come and support us. And on the other side, Pakistan was like within two boats. Their own people's
So do you
will.
feel this time the US is genuine as far as the peace efforts between the US and the Taliban are concerned?
Well, the history of the United States has never been a genuine one.
All right.
If today anything happens to United States, you will see another shift, a paradigm shift.
I
in the
think
policy.
they want to pull out. It is a 45 to 50 billion dollars liability per annum for the United States.
And even Donald Trump's policy, if I understand well, Ambassador Saab, is that he wants to concentrate on the US internally and shift all that is economic burden as far as external burden is concerned in the shape of benefiting the US people. Now, Isa, something that is very interesting in this whole respect, whether it be peace efforts, the NAP, the situation with India, Indian occupied Kashmir as well, is the Corps Commanders Conference that was held today as well. They also said that we are on one page as far as the National Action Plan is concerned, that we are there. Also, they talked about the situation with India. They talked about Indian occupied Kashmir. What we see, whether it be the National Assembly that you very regularly cover, Isa, and our Foreign Minister, whether you see our Prime Minister, whether you see the army, whether you see the law enforcement agencies, they are talking the same talk and walking the same walk. I think this is the first time in a long, long history of Pakistani politics that I have seen that happening. How is all of that going to translate into stability for Pakistan? You who cover international affairs and foreign affairs very regularly, your take on that?
I think there are two areas, defense and foreign affairs, where all the things should be done with consensus, and all the state institutions and all the political parties should be on one page, at least on these two matters. We can have internal political differences, likings and dislikings. We can have our own manifestos when it comes to politicking or addressing our own constituencies and our own.
But you saw that today also when Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab lauded Bilawal Bhutto Zardari and Shehbaz Sharif Saab. I mean, that was a good gesture, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I mean, that now taking everyone along on these two matters is the need of the time. But one important thing that we have missed out on your previous question is the Kartarpur Corridor initiative.
Yes, and a very important peace initiative.
When you talk about the
we are going to
achievement,
India, and the Indians will come at the end of this month as well.
Despite all the war mongering, despite all the domestic needs of BJP at this time, now look at the achievement of Pakistan. That the initiative that was taken by this government and
by Pakistan, remember, it was not a bilateral initiative;
Yes.
it was a unilateral initiative
Yes,
by Pakistan.
now that has put BJP and the kind of fanatic government, the Modi, who comes with the title of Butcher of Gujarat, that person cannot dare cancel that meeting between Pakistan and India on the draft proposal of Kartarpur Corridor. Although they have quite tricking their own audiences, they have shifted the venue from New Delhi to Atari border, but they cannot dare cancel that meeting. Now, that initiative actually won Pakistan like the hearts of 140 million Sikhs living anywhere in the world.
And I even feel not only the Sikhs, a lot of sane Hindus also were won over
Exactly.
by the initiative.
Exactly, that has actually been applauded, not just at the regional level, but at the international level as well. And when you talk about the achievements of like on the foreign policy front of this government, I think that was one thing which improved the image of Pakistan internationally as well.
Isa,
And
you
that-
remember the first address by our Prime Minister in which he said that as far as India is concerned, if they take one step forward, we'll take 2 steps forward. I mean, wasn't that a sign already since his very first speech that he wanted things to at least normalize to some extent with all our neighbors and for peace to be initiated? Peace is so important, Isa, don't you agree?
I definitely, I can't agree more on that, but like obviously Prime Minister talked about taking 2 steps forward if India takes one, but India like took a wrong step, so we took two of their planes down. So that also happened.
All right, so you can take it in that context as well. Ambassador Saab, we've seen the warmongerism coming from India's side. We've seen how the Prime Minister of India also continued drumming the drums of war and continued saying that we will teach Pakistan a lesson and we will isolate Pakistan diplomatically. Do you feel that the world has managed to dissuade India from warmongering, or do you feel more needs to be done by the powers that be to persuade and pressurize India? Your
I think
take.
this de-escalation has happened primarily because Pakistan had also shown its prowess, whether it's military or its diplomatic front. And same was also registered by the world community because they saw the truth. And they tried to blackmail Pakistan, and they failed. They wanted to isolate Pakistan, they failed. And this time, Indian narrative has not been bought by any of the major players. And it was, in fact, persuasion by the international community and influential countries to India that they should see the reason. Because if they wanted to ratchet up these tensions, you cannot control it. You may begin the war, but you cannot end the war.
That is very interesting. You can, as our Prime Minister also say, we can always begin a war, but we can never know when and how a war might end. I would like to end by saying that I really, as a layman, let's not put my perspective as a journalist, but as a layman, as a Pakistani, I'm very proud of the way we have maneuvered peace efforts in the region and have managed to convince not only our friendly countries but also those countries who had serious doubts about Pakistan, that Pakistan only wants peace in the region. There are foreign policy challenges, but that will take a certain time, but the major important steps have been taken. Thank you so very much, Ambassador Durrani, Dr. Rizwan Nasir and Isa Naqvi, for your points of view. Ladies and gentlemen, we want peace, and inshallah, peace will come to this region. Allah Hafiz.